Early Weigh-In podcast. We're back in Houston, Texas for a massive pay-per-view, and it's UFC 265, headlined by a fight for the interim heavyweight strap. It's a new sensation of the heavyweight division, and Ciryl taking on Houston's own Derrick Lewis. The live crowd, man, always creates a much better atmosphere for the fights, and I know the public and most people are all on Ciryl on Saturday, but I know we would not hate a post-fight interview with Joe Rogan and Derrick Lewis on Saturday either, man. A lot of flack given to Fight Card last week, but you know what? It ended up delivering with a whole bunch of finishes. A night where there's 11 fights and 7 underdogs cash. Just an exciting night of fights, and hand it over to you to how we did.
For 7 underdogs to cash and us to only be down 0.5 units, I think we were honestly on the better end of most cappers on that fight card. We only had 3 bets last week, and we went 1-1-1. Our big one on Sean Strickland, which was a 3-unit bet, that one hit with ease. Yeah. You know, it went exactly how we thought it would. Then the Danny Chavez bet, we kind of got bailed out, if I'm being honest. We got bailed out a little bit, but that was a draw. And, man, the Rafa Garcia inside the distance bet, we knew the day before it was a little bit mushy. Seemed like everybody was on that bet. And when the actual weigh-ins happened and they did the face-off, Grutzmacher looked bigger than we expected.
We were sweating already.
Yeah, we were. So we did end up losing that one. It's all right, you know, live and learn.
Yeah.
But a ton of really exciting matchups in this one, and specifically really close matchups. We look at the fight card. We have 13 fights, and 7 of them are lined within 20, 30 points of pick'ems. A lot of, 50-50 coin flip fights, and I think that we have a couple of pretty good leans. To run through a few of the bets that we already placed, we have our first one with Jose Aldo sitting at a -110, where we put 1.5 units on him. And pending the weigh-ins and the line movement, that might be a spot where we might double down on. Then we have Manuel Kape, who's a -180. We put 1.5 units on it. I know a lot of people think that that's a sketchy bet, but we think that Manuel Kape's going to prove us right.
And it's already back up to -200, so we bought in at the right time.
I agree. Then we took a stab on Vincent Morales, who's understandably the underdog here. He hasn't really shown in his past couple fights that, he has what it takes, but I do think that he is the more well-rounded fighter here, and I'm happy to take him at plus money. Then we have also a parlay with Ciryl and Alonzo Menifield, both chalky plays, but I think that they're, easy money. That brings our parlay odds to a -125, and we put 2 units on that. Our next bet is Johnny Munoz inside the distance. This one, we only took a 0.5 stab at, but we do think that Munoz has all the tools to get it done inside the distance, so we are happy with it. And then we did
just one of the lower level fights we didn't want to overextend on.
Exactly, like we did the Rafa Garcia fight last week. Then we have a small hedge.
How could you not?
Right, and we'll explain more whenever we break down the main event, but yes, we did make a small hedge. Lewis wins by TKO at plus 450. Honestly, Lewis against anybody with plus 450 TKO odds, we're probably going to stab at.
Most knockouts in history.
You got to. But to go ahead and move on to the actual card this week, we start off with a fight that isn't really lined closely. We do think that this is going to be another one-sided fight, like we have already made the inside the distance bet on Johnny Munoz Jr., who's 10-1, taking on the Afro Samurai Jamey Simmons, who's 7-3. Johnny Munoz Jr., he trains at a Sequence Jiu-Jitsu with Brandon Moreno, which is a great training partner for him. This is his first time down at 135 in the UFC. He made his debut against Nate Maness up a weight class at 145 and made a decent account of himself. A couple mental slip-ups, but he's in that fight for sure and arguably won that fight. He is a multiple-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, which I think will really serve him well in this fight, because you look over at Jamey Simmons, and a lot of his fights involve him getting the fight to the ground. And I think that that's going to play right into Munoz. Jamey Simmons, he's training out of Pure Vita BJJ with a couple of people that are Ode Osbourne, who's actually on this fight card, Ricky Glenn, and Montel Jackson are just a few to name off. So he does have a couple of good looks in training. But just judging by his tape, I think we're going to see a significant cardio dump come that second round, and we're going to see Johnny Munoz take over.
I'm right there with you on the side of Munoz, man. Short notice fight for his debut, so you're right, it's up at featherweight, and minus a few nut shots, 10 minutes of control time, minus that point deduction, he probably takes that fight any other night. Six of his 10 wins by submission, very, very dangerous on the mat. But at range, he also fires off kicks, man. Kind of like the way Giga does a little bit. You know, I'm not saying it's as technical by no means, but he's so comfortable off his back that he lets his kicks go for sure. And when he does get you down on the mat, man, Munoz Jr. is heavy on top. And when you look at that Manus fight, he is slicing right through this guy on the mat. And Manus is saved by the bell at one point just due to the nasty ground and pound. And what I also like about him, I kind of brought it up with Kyler Phillips a little bit a couple weeks ago, but Munoz goes for those takedowns later on in the rounds if he has to. He's real smart about it as well. And like you said, I think that wrestling will probably be a little too much for Simmons here, but you know, he makes a short notice debut as well, but against a much, much higher caliber opponent there in Giga Chikadze, and Giga finally got that first UFC finish that he was searching for, and it took a pretty low-level competition for him to get it in Jamey Simmons. He just set that body kick up so many times, eventually went to the head with it. With Jamey Simmons, you know, the guys he's fighting, they're very experienced, but they're not the best caliber of guys, you know. But you do like to see him finish, and you brought up a big point. Is Jamey Simmons, he does like to get these guys down to the ground. He likes to wrestle them. He likes to set up his submissions with ground and pound. And I just don't think Munoz Jr. is the guy here that, you know, you want to play around with the mat on. I favor him everywhere, to be honest, and the feet definitely on the mat.
Well, I honestly question if Jamey Simmons is UFC caliber. Mm-hmm. You know, it seems like we needed a short notice opponent to fill in for Giga, and the UFC is just kind of rewarding him for doing that. It's a tough one for Jamey Simmons, and sitting at 5'6", I'm happy that he moved down to 135. I think that's probably the right move for him in the UFC. But I don't think that that's going to be the factor that's going to start winning him fights in the UFC.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. They're not going to cut you after you step up and take a fight with Giga, but you come out here and you get finished in this one. I don't think he's UFC caliber either, and the way they're cutting people, wouldn't be surprised if he is one of those that get cut recently, man. I think Johnny Munoz Jr. is a pretty safe play. I do like to, you know, like we said, lower level fight. Rafa Garcia feels a little bit. I like that we took the inside the distance, laid a little bit, then to lay some chalk on the money line of a low level fight.
Agreed.
Our second fight of the night is in the women's flyweight division, where we see Victoria Fury Leonardo, who's 8-3, taking on Melissa Gatto, who's 6-0-2. Victoria Leonardo trains down in Louisiana. You've seen her getting work with KGB in a little bit. Believe she does train out of a gym where her husband's actually the owner of the gym, and he is, you know, her main coach and stuff there. Watching some of her regional fights, she's in there with some tough girls, you know. It's hard to gain some steam when you're fighting Random Maverick twice, getting your career set back by her, and as well as Erin Blanchfield, who's now in the UFC herself. She's just one of these real, you know, tough, walk-forward girls, and UFC thought she was going to be the perfect matchup for their pretty little 20-year-old Australian kickboxer, and Leonardo had far, you know, other ideas that night. On the Melissa Gatto side, been itching to make that walk, you know, looking through her social media, training down in Brazil. You saw her get work with Jennifer Maia a little bit back in the past, but nothing really worth noting. She's a tricky girl off her back, and she's still young at 25 on this layoff, so you hope some improvements have come. And she looks to be in good shape, but with very, very limited tape on Melissa Gatto, and she's now off her Brazilian juice. You know, I don't think either one of these girls are really a smart play. What I'm looking at, actually, is you can get the fight goes to the decision at plus money, and, man, women's flyweights, we didn't play it against Malcolm Gordon Figueiredo. We said it's flyweights out of principle, and you're giving me plus money. I'm almost tempted to do it here because both girls are very low level. You see a side here?
Yeah, man. So I'm with you on a pass from a betting aspect, especially trying to pick either side here. I personally was looking for the fight doesn't go to decision line because I was thinking, you know, both these girls have some obvious holes in their game. I probably don't even see either of them getting to the third round. So I was really hoping that I'd get, you know, decent money on fight
minus 240 or something,
but
like most girl fights.
Right. But to lay minus 140 on the fight doesn't go to decision on a girl fight, I can't do it. So. Right, like you take a step back and look at some of Leonardo's competition. Yeah, man, I don't expect her to do well against those type of girls, but she does have a great frame for the weight class. You know, she kind of has those that Ronda Rousey, the other judo girl,
or Hannah Goldie traps.
Yeah. She's so really big frame, a black belt in kung fu, and oddly enough, most of her wins coming by submission. So she does offer some well-roundedness in her game. But something that I really wanted to take note of is in her fight against Chelsea Hackett, she came in as the plus 200 to 3-0 Chelsea Hackett. Now she gets her ass whooped by Manon Fiore, which doesn't show me anything, doesn't make me want to back her at all. and she's coming in as a pick'em against somebody in Melissa Gatto who does have a legitimate win over Karol Rosa. Now, I did go back and watch that fight, and she was getting dominated for most of it, but at the end of the day,
it's recorded in the crowd or something, isn't it?
Right. It's pretty grainy. But it is, at the end of the day, it's a win over Karol Rosa, who's having success in the UFC. And it is just kind of one of those things where, a submission from guard, it's women's MMA, but I could definitely see that happening here in this fight again. As far as Melissa Gatto is concerned, nearly 3 years removed from her 2018 fight with Karol Rosa. And as far as I can tell via Instagram, she looks good. Yeah. She might be off the Brazilian juice, but it doesn't look like it. I think she just found a different type. She's got like Giannis Antetokounmpo arms, man. I can't find out her reach, but I guarantee you she comes in here with a significant reach advantage over Leonardo. So hopefully she's worked on her striking game, and I think if this fight goes to the ground, I probably lean towards Gatto here. Long limbs, I think that she's... I don't know. I'd lean Gatto here. I'd want to play Gatto here over Leonardo, but too many unknowns and a girl fight, so definitely okay with laying off.
Yeah, with Leonardo, you're right. She does kind of she looks to close that distance and lock up the body lock and try to take those fights to the ground. And you're right with Melissa Gatto being pretty tricky off her back and the famous armbar from guards that constantly finished in women's fights. Yeah, it does make you want to stay away. One thing that I kind of have a question with looking at Melissa Gatto is who she's tried to make her UFC debut since so far. And the UFC has given her matchups with Julia Vila and Maria Agapova. And I don't know what to think about it. Is it, do they think she can compete with these girls? Or do they think she's very low level and Julia Vila and Agapova are their prospects that they need a win for, So that makes me kind of think that, hey, Leonardo, thanks for taking Manel on super short notice and getting your ass whooped. Here's you a little layup fight off of a girl on 3 years' notice. So I really don't know anything about this fight. That's why I said I don't really feel comfortable picking a side. I'm actually going to go with Leonardo if I have to. But, yeah, man, I think I'd regret if I don't take flyweights plus money going to decision again.
I hear you. Our next fight is with Anderson dos Santos, who's 21-8, taking on Miles Johns, who's 11-1. We actually broke this fight down a few weeks ago, and it's been rescheduled due to a positive COVID test on the dos Santos side. Instead of going over it again, we're just going to throw it back to the last breakdown that we did. There is one thing that we want to note. The odds have changed somewhat significantly. Yeah. By fight time, Anderson dos Santos was a plus 145. He's now at a plus 180. So we've definitely seen some confidence coming in on the Miles Johns side, which is, it sucks because I think we were on the Miles Johns side at minus 175, and now at minus 205. It's a little too chalky for us to want to touch it.
I'm right there with you.
We move up the weight class to the bantamweight division where we see Anderson dos Santos, who's 21-8, taking on Miles Chapo Johns, who's 11-1. Anderson dos Santos, he's pushing 36 years old. He's coming out of Bubuino Gold Team in Brazil, and he kind of has an old school style of fighting, He's kind of like any of those wrestlers back in the day that used just huge, sloppy overhand rights to set up his takedowns. And if he doesn't hit one of those big overhands or get the takedown, he's kind of lost, Miles Johns, on the other hand, he comes out of Fortis MMA, and I think he has so many more paths to victory here. One, his wrestling game is up to snuff, and I think if he winds up on top, this could be a pretty easy night for him, especially if he can get Anderson dos Santos to the ground and control him. I do also think that Miles Johns has the striking advantage here. I think that as long as he can keep this on the feet, he's athletic enough to keep it at range. We saw that big power in his last fight against Kevin the TV Dad, where I know that we cashed and kind of proved some haters wrong on that one. As far as a 135-pound fight goes, this is pretty low level, I think that both these guys' ceilings is probably right at the brink of the number 15 spot, but they're probably never going to break it. So I probably am going to stay away from this fight unless Miles Johns gets into the minus 150 range. I think that's when I'd play him. How are you feeling about it?
Same with you, and deciding with Miles Johns out of Fortis MMA, much more better coaching, better training partners than what you're seeing on the Anderson dos Santos side. And they've also always got Miles Johns in tip-top, incredible shape. Man, you see him coming there with phenomenal cardio. And spent a lot of time in LFA and early in his pro career. Actually has a win in a 5-round fight over Adrian Yanez, another great bantamweight prospect right now. And you're right, in the Kevin Natividad, good fight for us. He got to bounce back from his knockout loss, kind of dominated that fight, going to be a 30-27 up until that nice uppercut in the third round. I think what he had in that Natividad fight is what he's going to have here. He was fighting a guy, a ball of muscle, where he's much cleaner, he's much crisper, and a whole lot faster with his hands and with his takedowns here. And that's the key with Miles Johns, man. He's always mixing in those takedowns, which opened up his boxing even more. And the guys we've seen Miles Johns struggle with, Batista, 5'9", Cole Smith in the split decision. He's a 5'11" bantamweight. It's just not going to be the case here with Anderson Dos Santos, who's 5'5", a little short, ball of muscle here. Dos Santos, man, he's got a ton of good forward pressure, which in a small cage with John's tendencies to kind of be the one who backs up on the outside, not taking the center of the cage, that does worry me a little bit because that's where Dos Santos does his best work with letting his hands go and shooting in that double. He's he's a BJJ black belt. He's super heavy on top, and you can't really make any mistakes when you're down on the mat with him, and you can't leave your neck out when you're going to take him down. We've seen him, upset the night over young Ricky Simone at one time in his career with the choke. So, Anderson Dos Santos, he is stellar on the mat here, man. And losing to Andre Ewell, to Niramani, and your only real win coming to Martin Day, where you catch a guillotine. Who Martin Day's 0-4 in the UFC. It's really, really low level competition that he's beating and losing to. And if you want my God honest opinion, man, one fight in 2 years, almost a 36-older Brazilian, screams cardio issues in my book, man. And I do side with Miles Johns, and I would love for that line to get down toward that range so we could play Miles Johns. Next up, we're in the flyweight division where we see Manel Starboy Kape, who's 15-6, taking on Ode Osbourne, who's 9-3. Manel Kape's been working a lot at Extreme Couture in Vegas and working with Javier Mendez, Khabib, and the squad there. And in particular, I want to bring up, he's working with Askar Askarov and Ulanbekov, who are both really good flyweights, really good wrestlers that are only helping Manel round out his game at this point. He came over to us as the Risen champ on a 3-fight win streak. Some pretty nice little highlights, man. But the UFC, it's just not really lived up to the to the hype so far for him, and for me as well, because I was super high on Manel Kape, and if the flyweight division was going to stay around, I absolutely thought this guy was a necessity for the division. On the side of Ode Osbourne, training out of a gym in Wisconsin, definitely not getting work in the Khabib room. He fought a lot on the Wisconsin regional scene where a lot of these guys were not very good. A lot of them have losing records. And this is a big thing for Ode, as he's cutting for the weight for the first time. He talked about waking up on weight in his fight with Brian Kelleher at 135, and the last one being at 145. He's going to be cutting down to flyweight for the first time, and the public, they kind of steamed Ode for a second when this first opened, and it dropped Manel Kape a little bit down to -180. We got in on the right time, man. It's a -200. I think we got the more technical fighter, and I won't be surprised if Manel Kape gets his first UFC finish on Saturday, man. How about yourself?
I'm very high on Kape here, man. I know that this seems a little premature, but as far as 125 goes, I think he's the John Jones of 125. Fight IQ-wise, I think he's extremely smart. He's one of these guys who has had in the past problems with starting slow, which is why I think this is an opportunity. I know we laid the chalk on him at -180, but man, the live betting after round one, I think, is going to be huge. You look at Ode Osbourne, somebody who hasn't been out of the first round since 2016.
And lost it, I think.
Yeah, he did lose it. Or no, it was a split decision win, I think. A split decision win, but it, it doesn't look good outside of the first round. His other decision was a loss, like you're saying. I just don't understand why people are in the comment section on our Twitter going, Ode's a killer, you better watch out for him. It doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm looking at his tape study, and I get it. He's wild. He comes out of the gates, guns a-blazing. But Manuel Kape's not one to overextend and get caught with something that Ode Osbourne has. Ode has kind of made a living on not being super technically sound, but being athletic enough to kind of slip and counter punches. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that against somebody like Kape, who is equally athletic, but way smarter, I thought that, the fact that the UFC is willing to put Kape in there in his debut fight against somebody like Alexander Pantoja speaks volumes, in my opinion. The UFC was high on him as well, and made a good account of himself in the Pantoja fight. Sure. I think it was a 29-28 on two of the judges' scorecards, which is good in my opinion. It's decent. And then you look at that Nicolau fight. He won that fight. He won that fight. He was a minus 500 going into the third round. And if you're telling me that he lost the third round after those knees to the body that he landed towards the end of it, you're crazy, man. I personally had Kape all the way in that fight. So right now, how I look at it, he's got a win over Nicolau and a hard debut fight against Pantoja, which is more than enough for me to want to back him here against Osbourne, who loses to Brian Kelleher, in the first round, and knocks out Jerome Rivera, who's
0-4 in the span of 11 months with the UFC.
He's a can. So I personally, I'm happy that we've got Kape. I think that his timing, his body work, eventually over the course of 3 rounds is going to be way too much for Ode, and I love that you said that he might get his first finish here, because I think you're right, man. Like, this is all set up for it. Ode doesn't do well outside of that first round, and Kape only picks up after the first round. Yeah,
one thing I do want to knock on Kape is it's the volume, and maybe it's him, looking for that home run shot too much, or maybe not being used to the way the UFC scoring is, because in Risen it's like it's like they score it all at once. It's not by rounds. So he's kind of looking for that home run shot. He knows he's got the whole fight to land it. Where in the UFC, you don't throw that the first 2 rounds, man. You've lost them. You throw 49 strikes in Pantoja and only 61 to Nicolau. You're kind of asking to get burned on the judges' scorecard. But I think the things are only going to get better for him. I think he's getting adjusted to it. On Ode, you're right, he's wild. But there are some things that I think could be good for the guy. I think he's really good at catching kicks when his opponents throw him in and countering off of him, or taking his opponents down to the ground. I think he moves in and out very, very well. And he's a pain in the ass off his back because he's super tricky, throwing up submission attempts. But when he comes against Manel Kape, it's not Jerome Rivera. And if he's going to sit here and strike with Manel, I think he's outclassed on the feet by a long shot.
Well, you talked about the 2 guys that Kape has fought previously and the volume being an issue. Pantoja and Nicolau are not people to overextend. There's somebody who are going to fight a technically sound fight, where you look at somebody like Ode Osbourne, who's more than willing to crash in there and give the fight that Kape, I think, wants. Kape's a counter striker, so he's looking for somebody that's going to charge at him. And given Ode's record, I think that it's a perfect opponent.
I feel you, man.
We move on to the strawweight division, where we see Jessica Penne, who's 13-5, taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who's 12-6. Jessica Penne, she's coming off of her split decision win over Lepido Godinez, which she absolutely needed to stay in the UFC. She's a former Invicta Atomweight champion almost a decade ago. She spent her training camp with Angela Hill here, a lot of the time at Steel MMA and Fitness. She's a BJJ black belt, with the majority of her wins coming by submission. I think she's got 8 of them. But she is definitely run into some problems when it comes to her strength and her athleticism, and really just rounding out her game outside of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu aspect. Karolina, UFC's giving her another chance. I couldn't be more excited about it. I really enjoy watching her. And if you look down at her a list of opponents, man, you would think the UFC hates her, man. I mean, she gets that title shot with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then she proceeds to lose the next 5 out of her 7 fights, but they're to future or ex-title challengers. Like, she did not get an easy fight at all. From what I can tell about Karolina in her return, she's been training with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which is a perfect opponent to train with, considering Joanna has beaten Penne in the past. But I will say I'm a little worried about Karolina coming back after the considerable amount of damage that she's taken recently. I know in her last fight she ended up getting a titanium plate in her face, and this will definitely be a new type of fight for Karolina. I hope that she can wear the damage well, but personally I like KK in this fight. How are you feeling?
I think I'm going to back Karolina as well. When she came into the UFC, I mean, boy, did she have some hype around her. She's this undefeated fighter, hailed as the one that's going to beat Joanna, because they had a close amateur fight back in the day, and she beats Randa Marcos and Heather Clark, and all of a sudden you're in a number 1 contender fight with Rose Namajunas. And props to her, she does get a split decision win, and it's fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk already, and you think Ciryl got a fast track to the title. 11 months from her debut, Karolina is fighting for the belt already. I can't think of one that comes to my mind quicker, to be honest with you.
Maybe Michael Chandler's ass.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael Chandler definitely getting a fucking quicker UFC title shot. But after the title shot here for Karolina, man, you're right. That's where that skid started. And I don't know if maybe her game's taken a dip, but she skipped a bulk of that division to get to Joanna. You know, she never had to fight Alexa Grasso, Michelle Waterson, Andrade, Gadelia. She never had to go through any of the meat of the division to earn that title shot. So maybe she was never going to beat those girls in the long run, you know? You see the forward pressure of Andrade and Gadelia, like, really getting in her face. KK, she's tough as nails, but she doesn't like to get hit, you know? In an Andrade fight, DC's like, she's got her eyes closed, you know? She's just punching for defense, and Penne is going to be in your face, you know? But I do like her training with Joanna. I'm hoping Joanna can rub some of that meanness off of her, you know? Because KK is a very talented martial artist on the feet. Within Jessica Penne, you talked about her being the atomweight champ. She's filled out pretty well for this weight class, to be honest. She's 5'5". I'm surprised she was making atomweight because I think she's bigger than a lot of these girls she's going to fight. She got a big, 67-inch reach. It's longer than Pedro Munoz's reach. But you're right, one fight removed from a 4-year USADA suspension as well. She really needed that. And just reading through the articles out there on her USADA suspension today before coming here, some fishy shit, man. Like, I don't really know what your biological passport is, but she's trying to alter shit on her biological passport. It looked like a real fishy situation, and she's one of 3 UFC fighters in history that's been handed a 4-year suspension. So I don't believe what she says. I'm kind of siding with USADA on this one. She's very talented on the mat, and I think that's probably where she's going to need to take this fight if she wants any success, because when she's reaching for that clinch, her head is dead center. She has little to no head movement. But when she does, get you on the fence or get you on the mat, I told you it reminds me of rolling you, man. I can work the side control, and all of a sudden, here comes a leg over my back to get a hook. She uses those Gumby legs, and she finds a way to get to your back and get that rear naked choke and at least make these fights close. And she proved, dude, Luque's got power, and she ate those shots. So I think she might be able to walk through some of Karolina's shots. But Karolina, at the same time, is way more technical of a striker than Luque is. But just losing 6 of her last 8 fights, and if you take the layoff, even if I think Karolina is coming off this Jan Jonan loss 6-8 months ago, I think she's a massive favorite against Penne still, to be honest. I think the layoff is what causes this to be so close, but it's also that layoff that's probably got me enough to lay off the fight too.
I hear you.
Moving up to the light heavyweight division, we see Alonzo Menifield, who's 10-2, taking on Ed Short-Fuse Herman, who's 25-14. With Alonzo Menifield, man, a lot of hype behind this guy when he first started. He's an absolute physical specimen, trains out of Fortis MMA, big power. What's there not to like about this guy, But once you ran into someone like Devin Clark, who was able to eat that power, able to extend him, things got a little tricky for Alonzo there. The muscles and cardio started to fatigue on him. Hands were dropping, wasn't able to defend some of those takedowns as easy. Much different from the first round Alonzo that we see. On the side of Ed Herman, man, absolute veteran. Approaching 20 years as a professional now. He's on season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter and has a win over Glover Teixeira way back in the day. And now 40 years old, you can argue this guy could be on a 4-fight win streak if that John Vellante decision goes his way. At the same time, you shouldn't be having split decision fights with John Vellante. But man, Ed's a grinder. Does he have potential to take Alonzo deep? Maybe, but I just think those miles are really starting to catch up to him. And in the Mike Rodriguez fight, Mike Slow Rodriguez was really dropping him and hurting him with the punches, the body shots, and like I said, I just think that durability's fading and his tendency to back up against the fence. I think Alonzo's going to let his hands go and probably get a nice little finish up against the fence, man.
So I think that's probably the most likely scenario is that Alonzo gets that first round TKO, but there is a prop on this that I actually do enjoy. That Menifield by decision sitting at plus 600 interests me, man. And I think, like you said, Alonzo Menifield known for having that huge first round, but Ed Herman's known for being pretty durable himself, and I think that if he can outlast that, that we could see Menifield have a pretty big dump of cardio after that first round. And that being said, I think that Menifield's going to do enough in the openings of each round, if it does go to decision, to get the nod. You know, he is so powerful that I think we could see a lot of Herman shelling up. But, you know, it is a little concerning seeing Alonzo Menifield sitting at a minus 250 favorite against anybody when we have seen some holes. And you brought up the Devin Clark fight. I mean, that's an overblown middleweight that was just able to outwork him. And that's where you talked about the cardio dump. And then you see OSP, and you realize that Alonzo Menifield isn't as big as we think he is. You know, like OSP is somebody who is actually
fighting at heavyweight right now.
Right,
Maybe
right.
Small.
And, you know, I think that in the future, Alonzo Menifield will run into more people like that. I know I was so eager to fade him off that OSP fight that I took a stab on Fabio Cherant. And to be honest with you, it was going how I liked it to go. Fabio had, like, I don't know, a few finishes where he was getting pushed up against the cage and was able to submit somebody with a ghillie or a Kimura or something like that. And knowing Alonzo's track record, I was okay with him engaging in the grappling with Fabio Cherant. But damn, it looks like he's added some tools judging by that finish, because he gets him with the it took a few notes off of OSP and gets him with the Von Flue choke. I mean, it's nice to see that he's adding some new tools to his game. Training out of Fortis, I gotta imagine he is getting some pretty good looks. No, Fortis hasn't been on the best run recently, but I do think that it's still a good gym. Outside of Alonzo Menifield's cardio being a little suspect, I think Ed Herman, everything about his game at 40 years old is suspect. And, you know, arguably a 4-fight win streak, but a lot of those have asterisks on them,
They
right?
definitely do.
Kata Sabragimov, 0-4 in the UFC. The Mike Rodriguez fight, he's cheating to get that win.
He should be in
know?
jail for that shit, dude.
And like you said, you go to a split decision with Gian Vellante, you're on my all-time fade list till you die, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
watching the Patrick Cummins fight, dude. Cummins cracks him, sends his mouthpiece flying. Herb Dean steps in to give it back to him and just gives Herman time to recuperate, and then comes the clinch knee a couple minutes later, dude.
He gets lucky, man.
Asterisks
He gets lucky.
for sure.
So I don't know. He has a ton of mileage on him, but like I said, somehow he's able to survive, which is why I like that decision prop sitting so high at plus 600. But ultimately, I think we both see it the same way. As long as the Menifield goes up there and does what we think he can do, he could probably finish him in under a minute.
Yeah, big thing for me and wanting to parlay this money line as well is playing the inside the distance. You don't even get plus money. It's minus 125 for inside the distance or TKO or something like that. So not even really worth it, man. I think a safer play just to parlay that money line with Gone, where we got the minus 125 and went ahead and slapped 2 units on it.
Love it. We move on to the bantamweight division, where we see Drako Rodriguez, who's 7-2, taking on Vince Morales, who's 9-5. Drako Rodriguez, he's 7-2, but don't get it twisted. He's got a lengthy amateur career where he has 13 fights and some boxing experience as well. He is fighting out of Sioux City, Iowa from Red's Boxing Club with Brett Welling, and also getting a little bit of work at One Combat Academy. I don't understand the hype behind Drako Rodriguez. I follow a couple cappers that are releasing 4% plays on Rodriguez here, and I just don't understand why, man. He's one of these guys who, at 25 years old, I still think there's a ton of holes in his game. From what I see in his striking, he charges in and almost crashes forward recklessly, and you know, almost gets a headbutt whenever he charges in, because he's not really setting up these shots. He's just trying to meet people with force. And personally, I think somebody with speed is going to absolutely demolish Drako Rodriguez, which is what we saw in the Amin Zahabi fight. You look over at Vince Morales. He's 1-3 in the UFC, but he's coming off the Zahabi win, who just starched Rodriguez. And if MMA math tells you anything, Morales is the side right here.
Especially plus money makes it super tempting.
Right, and you know, to add to it, Morales is getting good looks at Syndicate MMA. He's also working at the UFC PI, and from what I've seen, and it's a big if, Morales lets his hands go, he is the far superior fighter here, man. I think almost similarly to Uriah Hall last week, he's just a little timid with his strikes, and that can get him into some trouble. But man, I personally think that Morales, you know, has the speed here. He has the grappling chops that I don't see him getting, taken down by Drako Rodriguez and paying for it. I like Morales here, especially, like you said, at plus money, and we've already made a 0.5 unit bet on him.
Yeah, man. And on the side of Drako Rodriguez, you're right. I don't really understand the hype either. You beat your best opponent on the Contender Series and Manny Martinez by catching a triangle and some type of grappling transition, and all of a sudden you're the minus 200 against Ayman Zahabi. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Ayman Zahabi on that layoff, the tendencies of Zahabi to back against the cage in the hands of Drako. I'm not going to lie, I definitely did think Drako was the side that night, and I thought Drako might have got the finish, but then come weigh-in day, he decides to show up like 4 pounds on the scale over and just looks absolutely awful. And you brought up the best point that I wanted to make, speed, man. He just gets beat to the punch in that Zahabi fight.
He's stiff as a board in there.
You're right. And you would think with the UFC replaying that highlight of Rashad Evans knocking out Chuck Liddell for years now, these guys would quit leading with that big uppercut because your defense is just awful. And that's what you're right. He charges in, slings the uppercut. His defense is horrible, and Zahabi sleeps him. The counterpuncher of Vince Morales, like you said, he's a little scared to let his hands go. But I think Draco's not, man. Draco's going to push the action, and I think Vince is going to be there to counter him. Vince, minus 320 on the Contender Series against Domingo Pilarte, who's a 6-foot bantamweight. This guy's been on the UFC's radar for a long time. In the beatdown against Cruz Gutierrez, it's even money, dude. It's minus 110 across the board, and I know he landed the best shot of the Domingo fight, but didn't really necessarily look like the favorite, but even a Benito Lopez cracks him. But another, 5'11" bantamweight? How are you supposed to beat these guys when they have all that size on you? And when you debut on short notice, how are you supposed to beat Song Yadong? But at the same time, you watch that fight, Vince Morales gives a damn good account of himself. Look at the scorecards. When you go look at them, each judge gave Vince a different round. So they saw him win. One judge saw him win at least every one of those rounds.
Could you imagine what Song Yadong does to Drako Rodriguez? I mean, it's like murder.
Worse than Zahabi.
Yes.
Stiffen and worse than Zahabi. But you got to think that Vince has hopefully addressed those calf kicks when they're out because his stance is wide, and Drako does like to slam the calf kicks in. But you also like to think that Vince Morales, primary wrestling base coming out of high school and stuff, I watched Tony Gravely go to work on Drako Rodriguez, and literally in the 5th round, just Drako had nothing left, and he gave up and got ground and pounded out of there. Vince Morales, I think, has got a clear wrestling path if he wants it here. I like that we're able to snipe plus money for one of the last times I think we're going to see Vince Morales at plus money as these odds are kind of starting to flip. Low level, though, so I'm glad it's just a 0.5 unit. But, yeah, I do agree the dog's going to win here on Saturday.
Cool.
Our prelim main events in the lightweight division where we see Rafael Fiziev, who's 9-1, taking on Bobby Green, who's 27-11-1. Fiziev, if not one of the better, at least one of the most hyped 155 prospects we got right now. He's Tiger Muay Thai striking coach, moved to Sanford MMA, puts on the fuzzy hat after he wins, Matrix when people are throwing the kicks at him. He's downright just nasty striker. This line, man, I just don't know. It's been proven 1 minute into his debut, this guy is human. He's taken Alex White, Mark DeCasey to decisions. Don't get me wrong, the combo of Moicano is nice, but Moicano is protesting that immediately. Let's not act like Fiziev has just knock your lights out power by no means, And on the side of Bobby Green, training out of a much smaller gym, though, an Icon MMA, he's definitely not getting the looks that Fiziev over here is at Sanford MMA. And with that hands-down style of Bobby Green, it really invites guys into like a brawl and it makes these fights much closer, than they really need to be. It reminds me of the Angela Hill of men, to be honest with you. This guy's not finished a fight since 2013, but likes to complain when he gets burnt by the judges, and I can promise you guys here, if this is close and goes to the judges, UFC is not letting their star here in Fiziev, lose this one. Bobby's got an ego issue for me too, man. I don't really trust him to wrestle, but I do trust his durability to make this one a whole lot closer than these odds indicate, and probably enough to have me lay off altogether, honestly, man.
Personally, if I could have gotten Bobby Green at that plus 300, I'd be degen betting the shit out of him, to be honest with you. You talk about Fiziev. He has proven that when fighting taller fighters, he does a really good job of getting inside that boxing range and ripping to the body with some of the, like some
nastiest.
Yeah, some of the nastiest hooks you've ever
Mike
seen.
Tyson like.
Right. I'm trying to think of that featherweight, that
Topuria,
exactly like Topuria. But I would argue that he is untested, man. Pre-UFC, he never fought anybody better than a 7-3 and a 5-3 record. Then he, like you said, got starched by Mustafayev. Then whenever he fights Mark DeCasey, he's a plus 145 against Mark DeCasey. He comes in and starches Moicano, who's already been on a downfall of his career. And now you're going to open him or have him at a minus 300 around a minus 300 against Bobby Green. I mean, Bobby Green on a 3-fight win streak before the Thiago Moises loss, and you're thinking that Bobby Green's kind of revamped his career. He's a 15-fight UFC veteran here. And, he is somebody who banks on his speed and athleticism to get it done and usually relies on striking. But you're right. I think he has the wrestling advantage here. And he does have an ego problem. He does like to strike with guys, especially trying to prove that he is the better striking. But hopefully he uses his brain here, like coming off that Thiago Moises loss, he definitely is going to have to mix up some things, There is a new breed of fighter coming, but I'm not honestly saying that Fiziev is that new breed. He's kind of one-dimensional. Outside of the kicking, I personally think that the advantages that Fiziev has in striking is by a small margin, Bobby Green really is one of the fastest featherweights I've ever seen. And, the fact that Bobby Green doesn't have to worry about takedowns in this fight, I think will let him open up his striking as well, where in the Thiago Moises fight, like that's always something that he has to worry about, is a shot for the ankle and getting, heel hooked like Michael Johnson. So, man, even Bobby Green sitting at plus 260, it is probably something that I'm going to hit just personally, because I do think that Fiziev is a little bit of a hype train right now.
Yeah, so far, Fiziev's takedown defense, it's been up to snuff. We don't really see Bobby Green wrestle too much, so I don't really know the level of him maybe compared to Alex White. But Alex White goes 0 for 11 on his takedown attempts against Fiziev, and you see Moicano kind of land a good punch and kind of, I wouldn't say rock Fiziev, but kind of hurt him before he goes in for that takedown, and Fiziev sprawls nicely, man. So it's been up to snuff so far. And then with Bobby Green, the particular style, man, you saw Moicano slam those calf kicks home early, and it was halfway into round 1 when Bobby Green's already switching stances, kind of throwing off his game. Fiziev's got one of the nicest calf kicks in the game. I think that's something he should look to slam home. And then just the hands-down style of Bobby. Like I said, I trust his guy's durability, I do. But a hands-down style against a guy who slams body kicks and then can potentially slip one up high, I don't necessarily like the style. But again, I do trust his durability. My final, I guess you could say, decision, I'm going to go Fiziev by points on decision on the scorecards there because, like I said, Bobby Green's going to make a serious case for himself if this hits the scorecards. They're not going to let their little precious Fiziev lose.
You talked about Fiziev getting rocked in a couple of his fights, man. Yes, he is hittable, and that's something that I think a lot of people need to realize. His chin is held up, and he's shown no issues there. But at the end of the day, he is kind of on the smaller side of this weight division, and he has to work his way inside. Bobby Green's made a living on working that jab, and I understand that Fiziev's striking is so complex that he probably will find a way to get inside on him, but he's going to have to eat some shots before he does that. And like you said, I think that this is going to be a much more interesting fight than the odds suggest.
I'm right there with you, man.
We move on to the bantamweight division where we see Song Yadong, who's 16-5-1, taking on Casey Kenney, who's 16-3-1. Yadong, he's training out of Team Alpha Male and comes in with a ton of experience, even at 23 years old. From what we know, he's been fighting since he's like 15 or 16 years old. Who's to know if you can take that for...
Who's to say he's even really 23?
Right. He's a Chinese Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion and incredible boxing. He has very, very good hand speed, which I'll get to that in just a second. And he has great sprawls and takedown defense. He's shown that in a couple of his fights. Where he has kind of slacked is the cardio. I think from, I don't know if that's something that you want to not have at 135. It seems like it's pretty important. And in the future, I think that'll be a problem. You look over at the Casey Kenney side. He's coming out of Rise Combat Sports in Arizona. And, other than the Dominic Cruz fight, he looked awesome.
Yeah.
But I got to point something out in that Dominic Cruz fight. He's getting, outworked. He's getting outpointed, and he's just a tad slower than Dominic Cruz right now. Dominic Cruz is an older fighter, and Song Yadong has about twice the hand speed
Right.
of Dominic Cruz. I will note that Casey Kenney, even if he is tired, he keeps a high guard, which is something that he's going to need against somebody like Yadong, who's going to sling some fucking hooks at him. I think that Yadong's speed's going to win him this, and ultimately I think I'm on the Yadong side.
Yeah, man, I think I'm on the Yadong side as well. But if I gotta be honest,
him side?
I don't know that this. I think if I had to choose a fight that's one of the hardest to call on the card, I think it's this one, man. Song Yadong, you mentioned training out of Team Alpha Male, who's had quite the judges' decisions go their way here recently. And then, not only that, but just Song in general. The Stamen fight arguably could have gone to Stamen, and Marlon Vera definitely won that fight. And you see the judges giving it to Song here. We're in Texas, notorious for having bad judging. Song's got the power. He's gonna land the more meaningful shots. I think the more finishing upside of this fight is on Song as well. So good luck to you if you bet Casey Kenney and this hits the judges' scorecards, because I'll be sweating for you,
Mm-hmm.
But Song, he's just, for me, man, he's been a super difficult guy to cap. He opens up as a significant favorite, and he's like steamed to minus 225 against Stamen, Vera, and Kyler Phillips. And in my opinion, probably lost every single one of those fights.
Mm-hmm.
He moves really, really well round 1 and 2, in and out, the 1 and 2 down the pipe, extremely fast, like you talked about. But all that muscle mass come round 3 takes a toll on him, man. The hands are down, the cardio's really, he's sucking wind. The cardio's not that great. On the side of Casey Kenney, though, man, he's training with some pretty good talent. You talked about the Rise Combat, but also works a lot at the MMA lab with Kyler Phillips, who just broke our heart a couple weeks ago. But as well as Sean O'Malley, who seems to have turned Casey Kenney into quite the damn stoner out there. You look on his social media and it's nothing but Dr. Dabber products and stuff. But I do want to bring up the gym and Kyler Phillips, because Kyler Phillips is the last guy who beat Song Yadong, and they've game planned for Song Yadong before. They're victorious against Song Yadong, and you got to think that's only going to help for the game plan here with Casey Kenney, who's got a nice judo background, incredible volume. He gets in your face just slinging body kicks, left hands down the pipe. It's technical, but it's also a little reckless, man, I don't think Song's someone you can be reckless with. And at the same time, you look at round 3 with Casey Kenney, just losing it against Nathaniel Wood, and lets him come back in it. Loses it against Dominic Cruz to give Dominic Cruz that decision win that night. So at the same time, round 3 for Casey Kenney has kind of been just as much of a problem. And if he does look to grapple, and he was a flyweight in 2018, making 125. Song Yadong is not making 125. No. This dude is a ball of muscle, and I think if they clinch up, man, I'm curious to see it, because I think Song's actually going to be quite stronger than Casey Kenney in these clinches.
And much more likely to shoot than Kenney in this situation.
You're right. The more I talk about it, I guess the more inclined I am to play Yadong, but it's an extremely, extremely close fight. Song Yadong in the history has just let me down in the past, and it makes me want to lay off. But yeah, gun to the head, I'm going to go with Song Yadong. I think he's got potential to get a finish at the same time, man.
This is kind of a weird comparison, but the way Casey Kenney beat Alateng Haley, just being faster, beating him to every single punch, is really how I see Yadong winning this. I think that we really could see a masterclass here, and maybe the breakout performance that Yadong needs to justify any of the odds that he has received in the past.
Moving on through the night, we're in the women's strawweight division, where we see Tecia the Tiny Tornado Torres, who's 12-5, taking on Angela Overkill Hill, who's 13-9. Tecia Torres, man, you talk about a girl who has literally been fighting the best of the best her entire career. You look at who she debuts in an Invicta, and this is a girl by the name of Kayana Rain. It's the only girl, Tecia Torres' entire record, that did not make it to the UFC. She holds one of the best resumes in women's history. She's got an early win over the champ Rose Namajunas, a victory over Angela Hill in 2015, and she's always got really, really good training camps in. Her and Raquel used to be at American Top Team. They've since moved out to Colorado, which Tecia, who relies on cardio, that's even, does even wonders for her gas tank. And she's still getting to work in with girls like Rose and JJ Aldrich. There's a lot of good girls still in Colorado. On the side of Angela Hill there, she cross-trains out in California, gets a little work in Alliance MMA with Jessica Penne, but that's really about the only girl worth noting that you see Angela Hill working with. It's pretty much thrown early to the wolves herself. She had a little bit of Muay Thai background, but in her third pro MMA fight, she finds herself on tough, fighting the eventual winner, Carla Esparza. Been very active, I guess that's what you could kind of say for Angela Hill. Four fights in 2019, 4 in 2020, already fought once this year. She's real, athletic, has good footwork, good right hand. But I think if you're backing Angela Hill here, it's probably because it's 3 rounds. Because, man, come round 4 and 5, that stuff really starts to take a dip off. This is a really close fight. But if you plan to go out there and out volume Tecia Torres, out hustle Tecia Torres to a decision, you better be elite. You better be Zhang Weili. You better be Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Shit, you better be Marina Rodriguez, who's 6 inches taller and's got a 6-inch reach. The more I look into it, man, I don't like the minus 140 of Tecia, but to be able to get Tecia Torres by decision, which is super likely, yeah, man, I'm going to go with Tecia Torres by decision.
Yeah, man, I'm on Tecia Torres big here, man. I really am. I think that she's got a lot of edges here. Like, just right off the bat, we'll talk about age. Personally, I think Tecia Torres is coming into the prime of her career at 31 years old, and physically, fucking shit, dude. Yeah. She looks like a brick shit house on Instagram. I know that in that last fight against Hughes, she was preparing for Angela Hill, and you just saw that she worked her ass off to get to that point. And I gotta imagine that fire's still lit. In that Hughes fight, the output, it looked like she even upped it from what she originally had. For
sure. I bet the over 1.5 and knew I was done from the moment it started.
I actually hit Tecia Torres inside the distance for plus 500, which was a long shot. Yeah. But, she was throwing 10-punch combinations in the first round, and I would have really liked to have seen it go into the second round to see if she can keep up that output. But thankfully, this is only a 3-round fight. And like you said, working up in Colorado, it makes me think that she's going to be able to withstand or continue that type of output over the course of the fight. Joe Rogan said it best whenever in the commentary team in that Hughes fight. Tecia Torres has found this new level of intensity. I know her and Raquel Pennington were trying for a baby. They've since stopped that, and she is now fully focused on MMA. And coming into the prime of her career, I really think that she is putting it all together here. Angela Hill, man, if she didn't absolutely destroy Yoder, she would be the significant underdog here, in my opinion. You look down at her record, and it ain't aging well. Her best win is Marina Moroz in early 2018, maybe the Loma fight. And don't get me wrong, I like Loma, but that was like her second fight in the UFC, and she's small. Yeah. And I understand that Tecia Torres is also small, but she's proven to be able to get inside range and find ways to make her size work for her in this division. Man, Angela Hill, on top of that, she fights down to her competition more than anything. And like you said, trying to get into a point fight with somebody, I said it in the Michelle Waterson fight. You're going to get into a point fight with a point fighter, a karate point fighter, you're going to lose. I was happy that Michelle Waterson got the nod. And I just think that we're going to see another situation where, yes, it goes to decision most likely. And Torres is probably going to be up by a significant amount as far as significant strikes. Personally, I like Tecia Torres here. I think that there's enough reason for me to want to bet her at minus 140. Hopefully we'll see some love on Angela Hill, because I'd love to get her at a better price tag.
Yeah, Angela Hill's one thing I do want to say about her, the takedown defense, she's definitely been improving in that portion of her game, in my opinion, which was a big issue for her in the past, especially against Brandon Marcos, against Courtney Casey, those kind of girls who are really looking to take her down. She stuffed all of them after round 1 against Claudia Gadelha. Waterson went 1 for 18 on her takedowns, and then Yoder 2 for 6, and she absolutely pieced her up. So Angela Hill's looking good, and they're super close fights. But one point that you brought up, she's in close fights with the Claudia Gadelha of 2020, who's far past her prime. She's losing close fights to Michelle Waterson, who's 35 years old and probably past her prime. Where Tecia Torres, she's taking an easy 30-27 decision over a 31-year-old Michelle Waterson. Yeah, man, the more I look into it, I think Tecia Torres is probably the side. But again, this reminds me of kind of like the Casey Kenney and Yadong fight here. I got it going to decision. and I think you just got to be on the right side of it on Saturday.
Just another little piece. MMA math even tells you Tecia Torres is going to win here with a win over Angela Hill in the past, a win over Rose Namajunas, and the win over Michelle Watterson. It all leans Torres here, man. I think that it's all coming together perfect. And if Angela Hill wasn't as active as she was in the past couple years, I don't think that they'd be lined as closely as they are here.
I feel what you're saying.
We move to the welterweight division where we see Michael Chiesa, who's 17-4, taking on Vicente Luque, who's 27-1. Michael Chiesa, he's on a 4-fight winning streak since moving up for lightweight, which definitely his best choice of his career. He's training out of Syndicate MMA. I know he's got a lot of good looks up there. And like most elite 170ers, he's got great wrestling and an endless amount of cardio, which really will get him pretty far in this division.
Right.
He's only a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a point that I'll bring up here in just a second. I think that is, a significant point to throw out. He has great wrestling, but God forbid he gets swept or anything. I think that he could run into some problems with somebody like Luque, who doesn't get to utilize his grappling as much, but does have that base. Don't get it wrong. I really don't know where Michael Chiesa's mind is right now. And one of the biggest questions that I have is how focused is he? Between the commercials, the commentating, the sponsorships. I know he's got a recent, a girlfriend that he tweets out pretty regularly. And I just think that he's got a lot of moving pieces in his life. And similarly to Tyron Woodley's downfall at 170, I could see him kind of losing focus here and more or less focusing on that commentating aspect of his fighting career. Luque, on the other hand, I thought it was surprising to see him open as a favorite over an elite grappler, which he has not had to face yet in 170. That being said, Luque's shown a lot of good things, really good cardio, tough ass striking, so some really good striking, and a granite chin. But one thing that I think will come into play is his willingness to jump the ghillie. That's where I see this kind of my stab at this fight is on the Vicente Luque by submission side, which is sitting at like plus 1,400. Big stab, but in a fight that's lined this close, I am going to lean Luque, which brings us to the casual cap for this week. We are going to just kind of take this as a coin flip fight. I'm going to take Luque. He's going to take Chiesa. I don't know if either of us have a huge lean, though.
Yeah, man, but I need Chiesa to do something because thing's putting a fucking rash on my forehead here. With Chiesa, man, you're right. The move to 170, the best move he could have made of his career, and long overdue, in my opinion. He was super open about the brutality of his weight cut down to 55, and, felt like it was definitely taking a toll on his performances. Getting dropped by Anthony Pettis the way he did and submitted, it's definitely enough for him to be like, it's okay. It's time to move up, damn, dude, he's bigger than half these welterweights that he's going to be fighting, He's got great size, and, man, the first couple people, who is it, Carlos, Diego Sanchez, and RDA, it's two lightweights, it's three guys with bad takedown defense, and then with Neil Magny, you're right, it was enough for us to warrant a little bit of a shot on Magny there, and Michael Chiesa just went in there and stuck straight to the game plan. He took Magny's length away from him, didn't strike with him for a minute, put him on the mat, and didn't really let him up, man. It showed me that he's got extremely smart IQ and doesn't care if it's boring. He's not going to strike with you, man.
And really, even if he does get it to the ground, he's not notoriously a finisher.
Right. And then you had Vicente Luque in the media day this week say, I'm not a boring fighter. I'd much rather lose than have a boring fight. So he might make mistakes getting up from the mat, doing something that's going to let Chiesa capitalize. But Luque, man, he's a guy for me that I almost absolutely refuse to bet against. I've said it for the longest time. I wouldn't say he's one of my favorite fighters, as I say the most potential for him. But damn, that he really does never has a boring fight. At one time, this man was 7-5 in his career, and since then, he's 13-2, and he's finished 12 of these 13 fights inside the distance. What more could you want from a fighter, to be honest with you? And then not only that, but he does some work in Brazil, but trains a lot at Sanford MMA, and he's not just a body at Sanford MMA. And what I mean by that, Randy Costa trains at Sanford MMA. Henry Hooft and them aren't walking him down to his fights and stuff. Ian Heinisch training at Sanford MMA. Henry Hooft and them aren't in his corner. Henry Hoof, Gilbert Burns, they're in Vicente Luque's corner. He's a big part of Sanford MMA here. And on the feet, man, his calf kick is unreal, which could cause a wrestler in Mike who's going to be heavy on that lead leg some real issues. And what I like about Vicente Luque, he's not the most fast guy, but the dude's so technical, nothing has any wind up to it. He's able to beat a lot of these guys to the punches. He's got dynamite in his hands, man. Trust me, there is a world where Vicente Luque stuffs a takedown or two, and Mike's stuck on the feet with him where he doesn't want. But for me, the more likely scenario is Michael Chiesa to grapple this guy to a decision. But your 1,400 line is a little bit intriguing to me, and not necessarily the guillotine. We saw in the past where Michael Chiesa gasses, desperation shoots, and Jorge larks up a Darce. We saw Vicente Luque club Tyron into a desperation shot and lark up the Darce. So that particular sequence is what got me to actually stab on the Luque sub. I think he might catch Chiesa on the feet, get a desperation shot, lark up that Darce again. But the more likely scenario, man, for me is Michael Chiesa to put this guy on the cage and on the mat for probably 10 minutes of riding time in a 15-minute fight.
Just to run through some outcomes that I can see, the Luque, why I think he's going to jump the Gilly, I saw it twice in the Krantz fight and in the Nico Price fight. It's bittersweet because one, at least he'll try for the Gilly, but at the same time to make that being your primary defense in grappling to a wrestler, you're asking for it, So that's why I'm hoping that his jiu-jitsu is sharp enough to kind of take advantage of Chiesa. One other thing that doesn't sound great is Chiesa took 3 minutes before he actually shot his first takedown attempt against Neil Magny. You're not going to last 3 minutes on the feet with Vicente Luque. So I do think that we'll see way quicker than the Magny fight whether or not Michael Chiesa's game will be able to be implemented. And then one last knock on Chiesa is I've seen recently he's been really into the biking for his cardio.
Oh, God.
And I know you don't like that.
Oh, God.
But hopefully we just get a good fight. That's ultimately what I'm hoping for. And
potentially probably should have been the co-main event. Probably my favorite fight of the night, to be honest with you.
Couldn't agree more.
In our co-main event of the evening, we see Jose Aldo, who's 29-7, taking on Pedro Munoz, who's 19-5. Jose Aldo, longtime Nova União guy, coached by Andre Pederneiras, and largely considered the consensus best featherweight in history. He held the belt forever, and the only 3 guys to beat him or whatever, 4 guys to beat him. Peter Yan, the bantamweight champion. No, not even gonna say nothing else. And then Connor Volkanovski and Max Holloway are the last 3 featherweight champions, and every single one of these guys are a top 5 pound for pound fighter when Jose's having to fight them. And it's a 3-round fight, which is big for me back in Jose Aldo here because he is a very fast starter. With Pedro Munoz, trains out of American Top Team. You see him getting good work in with the slew of the Brazilian talent, Moicano, Adriano Moraes, Marlon Moraes. And he was one that was pretty much thrown headfirst into the bantamweight division as well. His debuts against Assunção. 2-3 fights later, it's Jimmy Rivera and Rob Font, which a win that's aging pretty well. It's a BJJ black belt. It's durable as hell. He's never been finished. The calf kick, though, for Pedro Munoz, it's his best weapon, but it's also a must for him, man, because he's got a 65-inch reach, and if you don't land that calf kick to keep your opponents in front of you, he's spent chasing like he is the Frankie Edgar fight. And you got Jose Aldo over here fighting Peter Yan, Marlon Moraes, and Chito Vera. Tell me one time calf kick's ever been a problem for Jose Aldo. He's got the big cage to move in. I favor him literally everywhere in this fight, man. I like Jose Aldo.
Yeah, what are you going to calf kick with a semi-professional soccer player and Jose Aldo? I mean, I'm with you, dude.
He's an OG kicker, man.
Right, dude. We're talking about 2 34-year-olds with 2 completely different levels of experience over their career.
Pedro's 2 days older.
That's crazy.
2 days.
Okay. Although he, like you said, the move to 135 is long overdue. After Connor kind of made his way through the featherweights, you kind of saw that featherweights were just getting bigger, right, and they eventually caught up to Aldo, which I think is what happened to Frankie Edgar at 155. But
and
Aldo,
145.
yeah, Aldo is fucking huge for 135.
Yeah,
I think he's going to come in here and look like an absolute unit compared
to
Pedro Munoz. Right. I mean, he looks good doing it. It's, I didn't expect it, but yeah, he looks amazing doing it. He's 34 years old now. His cardio is actually held up, even going down that weight class, which is huge. And yeah, man, I think that this is going got Jose Aldo written all over it. I'm glad that we already made a bet at -110. If for whatever reason Jose Aldo keeps on slipping, I know we're going to double down. But if it stays at -110, you can also expect a double down there. Munoz, like you said, the win over Jimmy Rivera, good. He probably did beat Frankie Edgar, even though it's Edgar getting the nod. You see that a lot. Right. One angle on this fight that I do like is the fight doesn't go to decision. It's sitting at +140 right now, and stylistically, I think that this fight is set up not to see the judges. And here's kind of where I'm getting that mentality. You look at the guys who Pedro Munoz has gone to decision with. It's guys like Frankie Edgar, Jimmy Rivera, John Dodson, even Aljamain Sterling has the majority of his wins by decision. You're going to go to decision with those guys, especially if you're not beating them. And then when you look at Aldo, anytime that he's fought somebody who's also a finisher like Pedro Munoz, you see a finish. Win or lose, Aldo's getting a finish when he's fighting other finishers. And you see that in the Jeremy Stevens fights, one that really pops out to me, the Piotr Jan fight, the Conor McGregor fight, both Holloway fights. I just think stylistically these are two guys who are known to finish, and we're getting plus money on them. So I like that aspect of it. As far as picking a side, Aldo is the move here. I think he's much more likely to get the finish, and that's sitting at like +400 right now. Definitely something I'll be taking some stabs at.
Yeah, for me, I'm leaning Aldo by decision here. Pedro, he is absolutely a guy that's going to stand there right in front of you, willing to take a punch, and I think that willingness to take a punch is why you see him be on the losing end of 3 split decisions throughout his career. He can make these fights tough, but man, he eats too many punches, and these aren't against top level strikers like Aldo is. I think Aldo's just not a guy you want to stand in front of, and the calf kicks, Pedro's biggest weapon, have never been an issue for Jose Aldo. The 6 guillotine wins Pedro Munoz has, Aldo's never been submitted. It's hard for me to see the paths that Pedro's proven to have success with Aldo, and I thought Pick'em was absolutely crazy. So thank you for all the money coming in on Pedro Munoz to get that down for us.
Yeah, one other thing is Aldo's body shots. I think that's where he's going to take over here. Munoz is kind of, he already has a somewhat soft body for 135, and Aldo ripping the body shots like in the Jeremy Stevens fight, I could definitely see him winning that way.
Yeah, and like I said, he spent chasing Frankie Edgar in a small octagon who's not even the most technical striker, man, and you see Aljamain, big speed advantage, causing big trouble. I mean, even before Cody Garbrandt got knocked out, the speed of Cody was causing Pedro some problems. I think Aldo's going to have a massive speed advantage in the boxing and everything. Quite surprised to see the line where it was, man.
Heck yeah. We move on to the main event where we see Derrick the Black Beast Lewis, who's 25-7, taking on Bon Gaiman Ciryl Gane, who's 9-0. Derrick Lewis defies MMA Kape. It's impossible to get a read on this guy. He's training out of Main Street Boxing, getting some good rounds in with Lauren Murphy over there. He has a 50% takedown defense, but it doesn't matter. He just decides to get up when he wants to get up. I love seeing the minute-long montage of just him sticking up his arm and getting to his feet. Ciryl Gane, he's relatively new to the sport. He made his pro Muay Thai debut in 2016 where he went 13-0. Then he debuted in 2018 in MMA where he's now 9-0 and fighting for an interim title. Honestly, as far as new wave heavyweights go, he's leading the pack, and he has everything you could want in a heavyweight. Like we finally have somebody who has got the size, athleticism, and fight IQ of John Jones, I guess, in the heavyweight division. I think that he's got all the tools to win this, and his footwork is 1,000 times better than Lewis. Everything points to Ciryl Gane, but Derrick Lewis is 10-0 in Texas, and we did already hedge on Derrick Lewis by KO, so we understand that the threat's always there, but man, this should be a masterclass for Ciryl Gane. Yeah,
man, with Derrick Lewis, he's got the most knockouts in heavyweight history, and after the vicious just knockout of Curtis Blades.
Cost us some money.
Which was all Herb Dean's fault, by the way. He's now tying Vitor Belfort with the most knockouts in UFC history, man. Like you said, he defies MMA Kape, and he's the definition of a puncher's chance, and somehow found himself in his second title fight so far. And I think he pretty much summed it up best in Media Day by saying the UFC should be embarrassed if they let someone with no skills like him become a champion. You know, it's the get-up game. He gets taken down in 14 of his 20 UFC fights so far. So 50% takedown defense, that was a little high, to be honest with you. I thought it was much worse. But the get-up game, it is. It's just pure strength. There's no technique. And when you do that against high-level guys, DC, and stuff like that, your back's going to get taken, man. And I really do think that Ciryl Gane's prime for a submission here.
Which was setting at plus 1,200 for a big portion of this week. That is, I love that.
But on the feet though, Lewis, he has like a tendency to just lure you to sleep almost before he just blitzes forward, throwing the right hand, the famous switch kick that he's got. But you're right, man. It is absolutely no footwork, and that's what's going to be his downfall here in this fight. He's fighting Ciryl Gane, who's just going to fire those kicks at him. And he has no footwork to get out of the way, man. Derrick Lewis just backs up against the cage, lets the fight come to him. No footwork to get out of the way of the teep shots up the middle. If he does start wearing those lead leg out, Derrick Lewis does not have the ability to switch stances to neutralize that. And, the reach advantage, man, Ciryl Gane fights so much longer than he really is. He's going to be in his face with the jab. He's been 5 rounds, man, twice in a row now.
And showed zero cardio.
Right,
issues.
He's great at pacing himself. He just fought, 2 months ago, so I know this guy's in killer shape. There really isn't a lot of people that I think I trust for 25 minutes to truly say I trust to be perfect for 25 minutes against Derrick Lewis. But I do think Ciryl Gane is one of those, but... Look at old Derrick Lewis, man. Look at the top 10. Derrick Lewis has beaten half of them,
Right. He knocked out Ciryl Gane's last opponent.
Right. He's knocked out, or didn't knock out, but beat the champ Francis, Ciryl Gane, cardio, striking, ground game, every physical aspect of MMA, it leans towards Ciryl Gane. So it only makes sense that Derrick Lewis takes this victory on Saturday, man. No, I got Ciryl Gane, and I'm pretty heavily invested on him inside the distance at plus money.
I love that you talked about how much longer Ciryl Gane fights than he actually is. I do think that I could see him, like you said, that teep kick, that long jab, getting in and out, and really we see Derrick Lewis whiffing on a lot of his shots. I just don't think Ciryl Gane's going to be there. And when you watch Ciryl Gane, he gets hit here and there, but similar to like the Nate Diaz fight when he fought Conor first, he rolls with a lot of these punches. Yeah. He does see them coming, and if he's not already getting out of the way of it, you're not touching him. I honestly thought that Volkov was going to give him a little bit of trouble just on sheer size, but God dang, man, the athleticism and quickness of Ciryl Gane, it's unmatched, man. It really is. Like you said, Derrick Lewis has a puncher's chance, but to be honest with you, for him to even touch Ciryl Gane, I think he's going to have to pull one of those folding over and then comes up with it, I can't imagine him getting a legitimate shot on Ciryl Gane. It'll have to be a mental slip-up for Gane to get caught by Derrick Lewis.
I'm with you, man. I don't even think there's a whole lot to say into this. Probably the same as most people out there breaking down this fight, and you want some free money on Saturday, bet the Ciryl Gane money line.
Put them in your parlay somehow.
For sure, man. It wraps up UFC 265's pay-per-view. I think it's going to be an absolute killer pay-per-view, even though we lost the Amanda Nunes fight. But as always, man, there's a fight on the whole card. The audience needs to pay attention for what's it going to be.
We already have the casual cap on it. It's got to be the Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque fight. Regardless of how that goes, I can pretty much guarantee some violence in that fight.
Honestly, man, I really couldn't agree more. Fight of the night for me, Leonardo versus, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go with the pay-per-view opener and Song and Kenney, man. I think it's going to decision. I think it's got split decision written all over it, and I think it's because both dudes come swinging, and I think round 3 is a shit show, and it's going to be a fun fight. My fighter to keep an eye on, I'm going to go with Karolina, man. She's making her comeback, and this is... Jessica Penne I think Jessica Penne is UFC level. I think there's winnable fights in the UFC for this girl. But she's definitely not on the caliber of girls that Karolina's been in the cage with. And, if she can stay on her bike, I think she's going to take this one, man.
I like that. I'm hoping, my fighter to watch, I'm hoping Kape shows why Ode is the hype train that I believe he is. Kape has all the tools that I think he could really show a masterclass out here against somebody like Ode. It's just about getting outside of that first round. And
I've been talking Kape up for a while, so I'd love nothing more, man. There's a plus money underdog play on the whole card. What's that one for you?
We have already played it. It's going to be the Morales pick. I think that he offers enough to make me think that plus money against someone like Drako Rodriguez is justifiable.
And rightfully so, as it's probably not even going to be sitting at plus money much longer. Same with mine as well. A lot of money's come on Michael Chiesa. That was a big one for me, is to play Michael Chiesa here. I think the more likely scenario was him implementing the wrestling and grinding it out, but the fact that I could get him at plus money was a big deterring factor for me wanting to bet him here. My best bet of the night, I'm just going to jump right out the gate with the half unit. I let you get me there with the Johnny Munoz Jr. inside the distance. Like I said, I've been trying to lay off some of the lower level fights and stuff, but I think there's a significant skill gap here. I do like Johnny Munoz, money line inside the distance, however you want to play him.
I like it. Kind of Tecia Torres is my best bet of the night, man. I think Tecia Torres is going to tear up Angela Hill, and see her at minus 135 on DraftKings. That's enough for me to pull the trigger. So
sweet, man. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hop in the comments. Let us know what you guys think on the video and who you have in the main event if it's any different from us. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to like that video and subscribe.
Peace.